There is a chocolate bar sitting somewhere in your kitchen right now that looks harmless. Maybe it's in a cabinet. Maybe it's in a snack drawer. Maybe it's sitting on the counter waiting for someone to unwrap it later tonight. You probably bought it without thinking twice. Millions of people do every single day. And that is exactly the point. Because the most successful chocolate companies in America don't just sell chocolate. They sell familiarity. They sell comfort. They sell childhood memories. They sell nostalgia powerful enough to stop you from asking what is actually inside the wrapper. Americans spend billions of dollars every year on chocolate. Most consumers assume that if a brand has been around for decades, if the packaging looks premium, or if the company spends millions on advertising, then the product must be worth trusting. But trust and quality are not the same thing. Not even close. Some brands have spent years replacing expensive ingredients with cheaper alternatives. Some have built entire empires on sugar rather than cocoa. Others have mastered the art of making consumers feel like they're buying luxury while delivering something far less impressive. And almost all of them depend on the same thing, the assumption that nobody will look too closely. Today, we're exposing 10 chocolate brands that millions of Americans still trust completely. Then, we'll reveal 5 brands that are actually making chocolate the way it should be made. The brand at number 1 isn't the cheapest. It isn't the most obvious. It's the one people feel safest reaching for. And once you see why, you'll never look at the chocolate aisle the same way again. Let's begin. Number 10. Parma chocolate. Most people don't buy Parma because they're looking for great chocolate. They buy Parma because it's cheap, and because it's everywhere. Walk into almost any supermarket before Easter, Christmas, Valentine's Day, or Halloween, and you'll find entire displays packed with Parma products. Chocolate rabbits, chocolate hearts, chocolate Santas, chocolate pumpkins. The packaging looks festive. The price looks attractive. And that's usually where the decision ends. But here's the problem. Many consumers assume that if something looks like chocolate, then it's chocolate. Parma has spent decades benefiting from that assumption. Look closely at many of their products, and you'll notice something interesting. Some aren't marketed as milk chocolate at all. Instead, they're labeled as chocolate-flavored candy. That distinction matters. Real chocolate depends heavily on cocoa butter. Cocoa butter is expensive. Very expensive. Replacing it with cheaper vegetable oils dramatically lowers production costs. And once a company starts prioritizing cost over cocoa, the product begins changing in ways most consumers never notice. The texture changes. The melt changes. The flavor changes. The entire experience changes. But because the products are sold as seasonal treats, most shoppers never stop long enough to compare. The holiday shape becomes the product. The chocolate becomes secondary, and that's exactly why Parma remains one of the biggest names in budget candy. Not because it delivers exceptional chocolate, because it delivers acceptable candy at a price most people won't question. But Parma is only the beginning. The next brand doesn't rely on holiday packaging. It relies on something far more powerful. Color, habit, and a design engineered to keep your hand reaching back into the bag. Number 9. M&M's. Few products in America are more recognizable than M&M's. The colorful shell, the cartoon mascots, the bright packaging, the slogan everyone knows. Everything about the brand feels familiar, comfortable, safe. That's not accidental. Mars has spent decades turning M&M's into one of the most recognizable candies on the planet. And yet, most consumers never stop to think about a simple question. How much of the experience is actually chocolate? Because M&M's aren't really sold as a chocolate product. They're sold as a candy experience. The shell provides the crunch. The color provides the visual appeal. The branding provides the personality. And the chocolate becomes just one component in a much larger system. Every design decision serves a purpose. The shell prevents melting. The shape encourages snacking. The bite-size format removes natural stopping points. 1 becomes 5, 5 becomes 20, and before long, half the bag is gone. Not because you're carefully enjoying premium chocolate. Because the product was designed to be consumed automatically. This is where candy engineering becomes incredibly effective. The goal isn't to create the deepest cocoa flavor possible. The goal is to create a product that's easy to keep eating. Again, and again, and again. Convenience drives sales. Habit drives sales. Chocolate quality becomes almost irrelevant. And that brings us to the next brand, A product so common, so normalized, and so deeply embedded in American life that most people never question it at all. Number 8. Kit Kat. Kit Kat isn't just popular, it's automatic. It's at gas stations, grocery stores, airport kiosks, school vending machines, office break rooms, convenience stores. It's everywhere. And when something becomes that common, people stop seeing it as a product. It becomes part of the background, part of daily life. That's where Kit Kat becomes interesting, because the product's greatest strength isn't chocolate, it's structure. The wafer creates volume. The chocolate coating creates richness. Together, they create the illusion of a larger, more satisfying treat. But much of what you're eating isn't actually chocolate. It's air, crunch, texture, engineering. The wafer serves a very specific purpose. It stretches the product. It lowers costs. And it creates a unique eating experience consumers instantly recognize. None of that is inherently bad. But it does reveal something important. The product isn't built around maximizing cocoa quality. It's built around maximizing consumer satisfaction at scale. Those are very different goals. Millions of people eat Kit Kats every year without thinking about ingredients, sourcing, or cocoa content. Because that's not what the brand sells. The brand sells familiarity, the break, the ritual, the slogan, the moment. The chocolate itself often becomes secondary. And that's what makes Kit Kat such a fascinating example of modern candy marketing. It's not just a chocolate bar, it's a habit disguised as one. Number 7. Nestlé Crunch. Nestlé Crunch is one of those bars people recognize instantly without even reading the name. The sound of the bite is part of the identity. The snap, the crisp, the little burst of texture that makes the whole thing feel more interesting than a basic chocolate bar. And that is exactly why it has lasted so long. Because Crunch is not really winning on chocolate depth, it is winning on sensation. The product gives your mouth something to do, something to notice, something to keep you from focusing too closely on what the chocolate itself is actually bringing to the table. That is a very old candy strategy. If the texture is strong enough, the mind stops asking hard questions. People remember the crunch. They remember the wrapper. They remember the feeling. What they do not usually remember is cocoa quality, or sourcing, or whether the chocolate is doing much of the work at all. Nestlé has also spent years facing broader criticism across its global chocolate supply chain, and while the company continues to market its products as familiar comfort foods, that familiarity is part of the problem. Once a brand becomes part of everyday life, most consumers stop treating it like a choice. It just becomes something they buy, something they know, something they trust, because it has always been there. And that trust is profitable, very profitable. Because the easiest brand to sell is the one nobody questions. And that takes us to the next one. A brand that carries a name people associate with tradition, but whose American version has left many consumers asking whether they are actually getting the product they think they are buying. Number 6. Cadbury. US version. Cadbury is one of the clearest examples of how a great name can outlive a great product. For many Americans, the Cadbury name still suggests rich, creamy, classic chocolate. It suggests something old-fashioned in the best possible way, something familiar, something almost European in spirit. And that reputation is powerful, but reputation is not the same thing as consistency. And the US version of Cadbury is where many consumers start noticing the gap between expectation and reality. People buy the name, they buy the image, they buy the assumption that this is the same kind of chocolate they imagine from the brand's heritage. But the American market has its own version of the story, and that version often feels different enough that long-time buyers notice the change immediately. That matters because brand equity works best when consumers do not stop to compare. The more the name carries the product, the less the product has to carry itself. Cadbury benefits from nostalgia built over generations. That nostalgia is still doing a lot of heavy lifting, especially in the US, where the brand can lean on international prestige without always having to prove it in every bite. That is the real trick. A legacy name can keep selling even after the original standard has drifted out of reach for the average customer. The packaging stays trusted. The emotional memory stays trusted. But the product sitting on the shelf may not match the picture in the consumer's head. And that gap is exactly where the money is made. Now we move to a brand that has spent decades turning itself into a gift box essential. A brand people do not usually buy for themselves. They buy it when they want the appearance of thoughtfulness. Number 5. Russell Stover. Russell Stover has mastered the art of being bought for a feeling. Holidays, anniversaries, birthdays, hospital visits, office gifts, drugstore purchases on the way to dinner. It is one of those brands people grab because they need something that looks appropriate. Something that says, I remembered. Not necessarily something that says, I chose the best chocolate possible. And that difference matters, because Russell Stover is built around presentation first and chocolate second. The boxes look classic. The assortments look generous. The packaging looks like a safe gift. And for many shoppers, that is enough. Most people never buy Russell Stover because they are chasing the deepest cocoa experience in America. They buy it because it solves a social problem. You need a gift. You need it now. It needs to look decent. And the brand has made itself extremely convenient for that exact moment. That is a very profitable position to be in. But it also creates a shield. Because when a brand becomes the default gift, people stop evaluating it like food and start evaluating it like etiquette. Is it acceptable? Is it nice enough? Is it polite? That is a much lower standard than quality. And brands know it. Russell Stover has benefited for years from that exact emotional shortcut. The box carries the burden. The reputation carries the burden. The chocolate itself often gets far less scrutiny than it would if it were being judged on a blind tasting alone. That is why this brand belongs high on the list. Not because it is the loudest, because it has become one of the easiest to trust without thinking. And that is where the next part of the list gets much more interesting, because the next brand does not just sell a chocolate product. It sells softness, calm, comfort, and the feeling that you are doing something gentle for yourself. Number 4. Dove Chocolate. Dove is one of the most emotionally intelligent brands in the chocolate aisle. It does not sell itself like a commodity. It sells itself like a mood. A little break, a private moment, a reward after a long day. That is smart marketing. Very smart marketing. Because once a chocolate brand becomes linked to self-care, people stop evaluating it only as food. They begin experiencing it as a personal ritual, a small emotional reset, and that makes them less likely to ask uncomfortable questions about ingredients, sourcing, or how much of the product's appeal is being built by branding rather than chocolate character. Dove knows exactly what it is doing. The wrapper is calm, the messaging is gentle, the tone is soothing. Everything about the brand is designed to make you feel like you deserve it. That is a powerful emotional trigger. And in the real world, emotional triggers sell better than technical details almost every time. The product becomes a reward. The purchase becomes self-affirmation. The brand becomes a feeling you can hold in your hand. But here is the catch. When a company wins too much on emotion, it can stop needing to compete on craft. And once that happens, the consumer becomes attached to the sensation of the product rather than the quality of the cocoa itself. That is why Dove is such a strong example of modern chocolate marketing. It is not just sweet. It is strategic. It is not just a candy bar. It is an emotional shortcut. And when a brand masters emotional shortcuts, it can quietly become one of the most trusted names in the aisle without ever having to prove it is the best chocolate there. Which brings us to one of the most visually powerful brands in the entire category. A brand built on gold foil, luxury cues, and the universal human habit of assuming shiny things must be special. Number 3. Ferrero Rocher. Ferrero Rocher is not just a chocolate brand. It is a presentation system. The gold wrapper, the tray, the round shape, the glossy advertisement aesthetic. The entire product is designed to communicate status before the first bite even happens. That is the genius of Ferrero Rocher. It makes the consumer feel like they chose something elevated, something thoughtful, something a little more refined than the average candy box. And because that feeling is so strong, the product itself often escapes the kind of scrutiny it would receive if it were wrapped in plain paper and sold in a generic bag. That is the power of luxury cues. They change how people perceive value before they ever evaluate taste. Ferrero Rocher has become one of the most successful examples of that in modern confectionery. It shows up at celebrations, at holidays, at office tables, in gift baskets. in places where the job of the product is to communicate generosity and taste. And for many consumers, it does that job beautifully. But the brand is not really selling cocoa first. It is selling a social signal, a message, a little gold-coated statement that says you spent properly. That is why the wrapper matters so much. It carries the entire emotional load. The chocolate is part of the experience, but the experience is really the point. And once a brand becomes a status object, it can charge more than the product alone would justify. That is what makes Ferrero Rocher so effective. Not because it is the most honest chocolate on the shelf, because it is one of the best at making people feel like honesty is not even the question. And now we reach the brand that many consumers treat like a premium default, the one that sounds serious, tastes smooth, and has spent decades building an image strong enough to make people believe they are buying something exceptional every single time. Number 2, Lindt Excellence. Lindt has one of the most successful premium identities in the entire chocolate market. The name itself sounds elegant, controlled, European, confident. Everything about the brand is designed to signal quality before the wrapper is even opened. And for many consumers, that is enough. They see the packaging, they see the higher price, they see the dark chocolate percentage, and they assume they are buying a more thoughtful product, a healthier one, a more serious one, a more adult one. That assumption is exactly what makes premium branding so powerful, because people are not only paying for chocolate, they are paying for certainty. They want the feeling that they made the better choice, the smarter choice, the more refined choice. Lindt understands that instinct extremely well. It has turned refinement into a business model. The smoother the image, the easier the sale. The more serious the tone, the less likely consumers are to question the details. That is why the brand works so well at scale. It does not need to shout. It simply needs to look elevated enough that people fill in the rest themselves. And once they do that, the premium price starts feeling justified, even before the chocolate is tasted. But that is also the danger. Because when a brand is trusted as a premium default, consumers often stop investigating whether the premium is actually being earned. They assume the answer is yes, and in the chocolate world, assumption is one of the most expensive ingredients of all. Now we come to the number 1 brand, the one that sits inside American memory so deeply that many people do not even think of it as a candy choice anymore. They think of it as part of life. Number 1, Hershey's. Hershey's takes the top spot because no brand in America has embedded itself into the culture more completely. It is not just chocolate, it is childhood, it is s'mores, it is Halloween candy bowls, it is school fundraisers, it is road trips, it is gas station checkout counters. It is the taste of a memory so many people have known for so long that they no longer separate the brand from the feeling. That is the deepest kind of branding, when a product becomes emotionally invisible, when it stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like a background fact. That is how Hershey's built its empire, by becoming inseparable from ordinary life. And ordinary life is where most chocolate gets sold. Most people do not pick Hershey's because they are chasing the most complex cocoa profile in America. They pick it because it is familiar, comfortable, universally recognized, safe. The brand has spent generations turning familiarity into trust and trust into habit. That habit is worth billions, because once a chocolate brand becomes part of the emotional architecture of the country, it does not need to win every blind taste test. It only needs to remain present, and Hershey's has done that better than almost anyone. That is why it is number 1. Not because it is the rarest, not because it is the most premium, but because it has mastered the most powerful thing in consumer culture. Memory, the 5 brands that are actually real chocolate. Now let's move to the brands that do something different. They do not just sell a feeling, they focus on the chocolate itself. The ingredients matter, the sourcing matters, the craft matters, and the product is built to stand on its own without nostalgia carrying it. Number 5, Theo Chocolate. Theo is one of the clearest examples of a chocolate company that treats ingredients seriously. It has built its reputation around organic chocolate, sourcing transparency, and a more thoughtful approach to production. That does not just matter on paper, it matters in the finished bar. Theo is the kind of chocolate that tastes like someone cared about the recipe before they cared about the advertisement. That alone separates it from a huge portion of the mainstream market. Because real chocolate should not need a storyline to justify itself. It should taste good because it was made well. Theo understands that, and that is why it belongs on this side of the list. Number 4, Taza chocolate. Taza is not trying to be the smoothest chocolate in the world. That is part of the appeal. It has a rougher, bolder, more intense character that feels honest from the first bite. It tastes less processed, less over-engineered, more like chocolate with a point of view. That is what makes Taza stand out. It does not try to disappear into sugar and softness. It wants you to notice the cacao, to notice the texture, to notice the fact that chocolate can still taste like something with personality instead of something flattened into candy paste. For people who want real chocolate rather than just a sweet treat, Taza is a serious answer. Number 3, Tony's Chocolonely. Tony's Chocolonely built its identity around transparency and fairness. It is one of the few chocolate brands that makes the supply chain part of the brand itself. That matters because most consumers never hear that side of the story unless a company decides to talk about it openly. Tony's does, loudly, clearly, and consistently. The uneven bar design, the messaging, the mission, and the visible purpose all work together to make the brand feel like more than a snack. It feels like a statement. That kind of honesty is rare in chocolate, and because it is rare, it becomes valuable. Tony's proves that consumers do not just want better chocolate, they want to know what kind of system their chocolate came from, and the brand is built around answering that question instead of avoiding it. Number 2, Alter Eco. Alter Eco has become one of the strongest examples of premium chocolate that still feels grounded in real substance. Organic ingredients, thoughtful sourcing, a cleaner, simpler chocolate philosophy, and a finished product that does not rely on gimmicks to feel special. That is important, because a lot of brands talk about sustainability. A lot of brands talk about values. Very few make the product feel like those values actually survived the journey from slogan to wrapper. Alter Eco does a better job than most. It gives consumers the sense that the chocolate was made carefully from the start, not just decorated carefully at the end. That difference matters, and it is a big reason why this brand belongs near the top. Number 1, Hu chocolate. Hu takes number 1 because it strips away everything unnecessary. No overcomplicated pitch, no candy-style distractions, no loud storytelling pretending to be proof. Just a clean ingredient approach and a chocolate bar that exists to taste like chocolate. That simplicity is powerful. In a market full of emotional branding, Hu wins by reducing the noise. For consumers who are done with ingredient confusion, over-processing and marketing that says too much while revealing too little, Hu feels like a reset. It is the kind of bar people buy when they want to remember what real chocolate is supposed to feel like. That is why it takes the top spot. Because the best chocolate usually does not need to convince you it is the best chocolate. It just is. Closing 10 brands built on nostalgia, convenience, and emotional marketing. 5 brands built on cocoa, transparency, and real ingredient quality. That is the difference. Not just taste, not just price, philosophy. Because once you start reading labels instead of just recognizing logos, the whole chocolate aisle looks different. The companies making the best chocolate are not always the ones spending the most money convincing you they are, and that is exactly why the truth matters.